Cadest and Paula, you're live. Take it away.
Welcome everybody to our finale. Thank you everyone for joining us. I want to just take a second to thank everyone who put their time in making this beautiful event today. I'd like to introduce our Black Student Union President, Cadest Amsalu. She will be doing our land acknowledgement and labor acknowledgement. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, Paula. I will start with the labor acknowledgement. On behalf of North Seattle College, we acknowledge that we occupy the traditional ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Duwamish tribe, a people that are still here, continuing to honor and bring to light their ancient heritage. Without them, we would not have access to this gathering, dialogue, and learning space. We ask that we take this opportunity to thank the original caretakers of this land who are still here. We also recognize that enslaved and indentured peoples were forced into unpaid and underpaid labor in the construction of this country, state, and city. To the people who contributed this immeasurable work and their descendants, we acknowledge our and their indelible mark on the space in which we gather today. It is our collective responsibility to critically interrogate those histories, to repair harm, and to honor, protect, and sustain this land.
Thank you, Cadest. I would like to call on North's beloved President, Dr. Crawford. We honor and acknowledge Dr. Crawford for your support, advocacy, and leadership. A true trailblazer in our community who is at the helm of work to advance Black student success, racial equity, student achievement, and faculty and staff empowerment. Thank you, Dr. Crawford. Now at this time, I happily introduce our beloved North Seattle College President, Dr. Crawford.
Well, thank you so much. And hopefully y'all can hear me. I'm in my office, so it's a little different. Okay, great. Thank you for being here today. I'm not going to take a tremendous amount of time, but I do have some things that are pressing on my mind that I just want to mention, and actually pressing on my heart. But first, thank you for your touching and heartfelt words and for the introduction. I really appreciate that. Thank you to our BSU president, Cadest. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And the Black Student Union, African American Student Affinity, and all of the partners for creating an amazing Black History Month for 2022 in this challenging environment. You've provided us with historical content while highlighting and emphasizing the important contribution and resilience of African Americans throughout history. Now, I also want to take a moment to honor the champions, if you will, in our Black community, our faculty, our staff, our students, both present and never forgotten from our beloved college community. And right now, I ask that you honor all of our Black colleagues, faculty and staff and students, and our allies by adding their names and fond memories to the chat so that we can bring them into this space during this time. So while you all are doing that, I just want to make a few comments. You know, the celebration of Black History Month recognizes the beauty of Black history and recognizes this history to be a global history. And we've come a long way. However, we continue to have significant work to do. We're in a time where there are those who talk the talk, but don't walk the talk. These are people who want to be seen as supportive, but will not support the telling of our true history. And they talk about banning literature and resources that give an empowering view of Black history. There are also individuals who talk a good game, but don't use their personal or political power to remove systemic barriers for those who are oppressed. We as Americans take great pride in the power of the vote and the right to choose. Yet in the past few years, there have been systemic actions taken to manipulate electoral district boundaries, to create advantages and disadvantages for political parties. There are rules being created to obstruct the voting process by creating, frankly, inhumane polling protocols, like not having the ability to give someone who's standing in line on a hot day to vote a bottle of water or a drink of water, and coming up with creative ways to turn people away from the polls, while also finding ways to disqualify votes. All of this is unjust, inhumane, and an excessive abuse of power. If we truly believe that Black history is also the history of America, and it is a rich and enduring heritage, which is part of the soul of this country, then we need to reject the insulting and irresponsible contradictions that we often witness in society today. Let's embrace our allies. Let's seek clarity, seek to hear, and seek to be heard. Black history is rich, and we are all beneficiaries of this wealth. We have a powerful voice, and let's use it. So again, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Crawford. At this time, I'd like to take a minute to introduce José Amador. He is a writer, actor, and director whose credits include local productions of Lilo Cruz's Two Sisters and a Piano, Rachel Atkins, Black Like Us, collaborations with Nick Stokes, Liam White, and solo works like El Hijo Prodigo, among others. He is also a tutor navigator at North Seattle College, Page One Writing Center, Thank you, José, for all the amazing, amazing things you do. Muchas gracias and bienvenido. José Amador.
Gracias, and thank you, Paula. Lola Peters is an essayist and poet living in Seattle, Washington. She serves as the Voices editor for the South Seattle Emerald and has written articles for several publications, including the near and dear to me Seattle Star and Crosscut, where she has made a habit of angering boomers, yuppies, and folks of a certain privileged strata for a number of years now. She writes essays to clear her mind and poetry to cleanse her soul. Her first book of essays, The Truth About White People, along with her 2 volumes of poetry, Taboos, and The Book of David, a coming-of-age tale, are available at Elio Bay Book Company in Seattle, Third Place Books in Seward Park, and other fine book-selling retailers both online and in the physical realm. Some of her newest poetry will be included in the next anthology published by the African American Writers Alliance, entitled Black Writers Unmasked, and I could continue like this for at least a couple of days, but instead I would like to say hello to our guest. Everybody, please start using the clapping emoji in your chat box and say hello to Lola Peters. Hello, Lola, as we sit here in the awkward silence. How are you doing?
Hi, Jose. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Before we get lost in talking, which we are wont to do, Lola will now read excerpts from the latest book of essays, The World I Want, as well as a handful of her poems. Lola?
Thank you. Thank you to the BSU, the Office of EDI, the AHSS Division, Dr. Crawford, and especially Jim Jewell for making this invitation. And I'm really grateful to be with you. I'd like to start with my latest poem, which I wrote just a couple of days ago. The birth of generational trauma. A baby was born in Kiev's subway today. An old woman sat in her apartment, alone in a wheelchair, watching bombs explode across her city, wondering who will gather her things. A young man realized he will never again receive his chemotherapy treatments. A father knew his dialysis will never resume. a mother stared at the remaining insulin vials for her 7-year-old. Employees understood their paychecks will never come. In 20 years, they will publish a former Russian soldier, his confessional, the next Amy Tan, her mother's journey to freedom, the next Bob Woodward, the Kremlin's damning documents. 10 years ago, a power-hungry fool killed Trayvon Martin. This week, a power-hungry fool attacked Ukraine. Today, a baby was born in Kiev's subway. From there, I have been, for many years now, I have been writing critiques of our society. And they have been in both poetic and essay form. And I realized about 3 months ago that although I'd been writing a lot of critique, I'd never ever articulated, not to myself, let alone the world, what standard I was using for that critique. You know, when we criticize something, it's because we believe it's not right, but we seldom actually say, well, because this is what's right. And so what I have been working on the last couple of months is to articulate that and hopefully produce a book that will describe the world I want. So what I want to do is I want to read a couple of essays and that are works in progress. So for those of you who are editors out there, do not expect any level of perfection but my own. And so what I want to do for each essay is I want to start by reading a poem to introduce it, and then the essay. And the first topic is about education, and that seemed really apropos for the setting that we're in. The poem is called Danger, and it was inspired by a painting of a little girl staring straight out from the canvas. Danger. There is nothing more dangerous than a child. Those tiny creatures whose internal mystery is still unfolding, yet see beyond what we display to bear our motives and unravel our intent. They mine the truth of love, fear, loathing, kindness from the depths of our souls with one searing gaze. The children. Nothing defines a society more clearly than the way it treats its children. They come into this world with no baggage of their own, ready to be instructed and guided. Every child is born curious. In the early months, they watch their surroundings carefully. They listen. Just because they don't have the physiological ability to respond doesn't mean they aren't learning. In short order, they realize the sounds coming out of people's mouths have meaning, and they associate those sounds with behavior. They understand the difference between safe tones of voice and those signaling a problem. They recognize who will feed them and who will play. If there are pets around, they will differentiate them from humans, but still expect to communicate with them. As they learn how to become mobile, they invoke their senses to learn about everything. Peekaboo is about learning to see. Uh-oh is a lesson in sound. Everything is to be touched, or better yet, subjected to one of their most used senses, taste. While hands and feet provide a sense of texture, temperature, and volume, taste adds to those with, well, taste, and often smell. Astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson describes children as the first scientists. Everything they do is an attempt to better understand their surroundings. A vase pulled off a coffee table and broken is a lesson in gravity. Soup and ice cream are lessons in hot versus cold. Running outside in the rain without an umbrella is a lesson in nature's ways and an entry into physics. By age 2, most children have learned that magic word, no. It's fascinating to watch adults use the word. It's usually the first restrictive word a child learns, the first boundary it encounters. How often, I wonder, is it used by an adult out of convenience rather than necessity? How often do parents, guardians, teachers, or other adults step into a child's action because they don't want to clean up a mess or take the time to let the child work to the outcome of their current experiment? How many life lessons are pushed to later in life because the child wasn't allowed to learn them during this phase of development? By age 3, children come to the very best word in the dictionary. Why? Their physiology is finally caught up and they're rapidly developing sophisticated language. They're still experimenting with emotions and don't quite know when and how to express them physically instead of or with language. They are in full scientist mode. Here's where they either become lifelong learners and adapters or shrink away from challenges and change. Here's where adults start to do the most well-intentioned damage. To be clear, I'm not suggesting a child be left to hurt themselves. Children definitely should, for example, be taught not to run into the street, but not by being yelled at. My friend Carol Ann Sarah taught her daughter at age 4 by sitting on the curb with her and rolling oranges in the streets as cars approached. As each orange got squashed, the child understood what could happen. Sometimes, though, they need to learn to fail and recover on their own. Rather than being angry when they pull something off a shelf and break it, the adult could express disappointment, then show them how to repair it. Every moment with a child contains the opportunity to teach. Then we take these wonderful, wonder-filled little creatures and send them to school, where they are immediately taught to be quiet, sit still, do as they're told, and stop asking questions. Any bits of curiosity surviving from their subjugation by the adults in their lives are forced further and further out of sight. There is a long history to the development of education in this country, especially public education. Since anyone can use their internet search engine to learn about the subject, I won't replicate the information here. Suffice it to say, public education in particular was originally developed to give white men the skills needed for them to contribute to the 19th and early 20th century businesses. The most rudimentary education, arithmetic and writing skills, were explicitly denied to all non-white people, regardless of gender. In Southern states, education of a person of African descent was illegal and punishable by fines and imprisonment. The basic model for education remained static throughout the centuries. Teachers were authorities on content, imbued with the power to force-feed students information in an order given the title of curriculum. The purpose of education among the male white economic elite was to learn to wield power and control the direction of the world's resources while defining its trajectory. The purpose of knowledge among the rest of the populace was to learn just the right skills needed to serve the needs of the elite. The elite education included philosophy, religion, and other non-practical subjects, while the run-of-the-mill education, when it was available, focused on what became known as the basics. Public education was never intended for the elite. As business needs developed, the public school curriculum struggled to keep up with it, yet kept the same basic model of teaching and expectations. It was assumed children who didn't respond well to the force-feeding model simply couldn't learn. This model was only challenged a few decades ago when educators like Maria Montessori, Paulo Freire, and others dared to suggest the deficit might be in the method of teaching and not in the student. Over the 20th century, many private schools moved from the force-feeding model, but public schools did not. As a result, children are often taught by content experts, many with limited communication skills. Since access to education was limited through the 19th and much of the 20th century, educators were and continue to be mostly white. Black colleges and universities, which came into being in the early 20th century, became a primary source of Black educators. However, they too clung to the pre-existing model of force-fed education. Watch a TV series like Ken Burns' Prison Behind Bars, which is available on Netflix right now, and it becomes quickly evident how many minds our society wastes. People who could be laying the framework for our future languish instead in an intellectual wasteland. It has been the development of education for children deemed disabled that has forced an evaluation of the methods used to teach and, at the most basic level, raised the question, what makes a teacher qualified? As understanding of dyslexia and other learning styles made it apparent most any child could learn, the importance of teachers' ability to adjust communication to the child's learning style also became obvious. This was followed by a realization teachers needed to be fluent in understanding of the context of a child's life. For example, a child growing up in a competitive family will define aggression differently from a child growing up in a family based in consensus. A child raised in a community that values acquisition will have a different relationship to possession of things than a child who grows up in a sharing environment. Conflicts arise based on many such differences. Teachers who don't recognize how they themselves are rooted in those types of differences cannot possibly teach effectively. Education must happen in a relational context where everyone is an active participant. Educators must see themselves as part of a learning community where they potentially have as much to learn from their students as the reverse. Students must be in an environment where they can pursue their natural curiosity with guidance from educators and support from everyone in the learning environment. Project-based learning is what creates that environment. In my association with Technology Access Foundation, I've seen the smallest of children transformed into enthusiastic, engaged, thoughtful, happy learners. I've watched dozens of middle school children bored in their daytime public school classrooms become passionate students willing to tackle complex scientific and social problems. I've seen high school students who were passed over in their public schools' academic enrichment programs show true genius and go on to graduate from elite colleges with distinction. Taft's model is simple. Create a public school with a learning community built on mutual respect and centered around the tools students need to become fulfilled, thoughtful, interesting people who fully bring their gifts and talents to society. The student is the reason the school exists. The student, every student, is seen as gifted, and the responsibility of discovering those gifts and maximizing them within each student belongs first to the student, then to every member of the learning community. Using project-based learning, students learn what adults know in real life. No one succeeds alone. They learn to collaborate, create, and celebrate in a process that uses their own curiosity, interest, and passion as the framework for learning. No one says it's easy, but Taft's proof of concept is 25 years strong. Unlike charter schools, Taft works as a partner within existing public schools, trains teachers to guide students through their learning experience, and ensures wraparound services are available to support the entire learning community. With Taft's success, 100% high school graduation rate, 98% college graduation, you would think every district in the state of Washington would be clamoring to become a partner. As is predictable, though, that's not the case. Instead, vanity schools, amply funded by celebrities or cloaked as charter schools, eat up public and private resources. Rather than rallying around a program with proven success for all students, schools arise with no long-term track record. No one questions their core philosophies. No one asks for proof of concept. No one asks if they cherry pick already succeeding students. I want a world where children are seen as the future's potential, where every child's gift is carefully unwrapped and joyously celebrated, where parents and teachers develop communication skills, enabling them to be the trellis around which a learning mind can wrap itself. So my second essay. Given the times that we're living in, it seems to me that one of the things that we need to examine are some of the myths that we hold on to, that our society is built on, that we tend to avoid. So just a second, I need to take a sip of water. And we'll go into the second essay. I want to start again with a poem. The Hero Speaks. I lie here night after night, riddled with guilt, gulping down rage, shaking with secret shame, wanting to reach beyond this eternal barrier, to tell you that I am just a man who was leaving tomorrow on vacation, was in love with my wife, needed to get my tires rotated, just filed for divorce to marry my assistant, forgot to pick up my clothes from the cleaners, cheated on my taxes, loved my kids, hoped to close another deal today, stole from my company, hated my job, loved my job, loved my boyfriend more than my family, loved my family more than my girlfriend, hated war, wanted to kill, didn't want to die. To tell you that I am just a woman who forgot to eat breakfast this morning, just started menopause, didn't want this child just discovered in my belly, had a migraine, yelled at my kids, baked fresh cookies for my staff meeting, drank too much, was in debt over my head, was closing on a new home today, loved to dance in the nude, had a secret second job, was going on my first date tonight, loved living alone, hated living alone, was about to celebrate 25 years in a loveless marriage, just met the love of my life. But you have covered my mouth with crime tape marked hero. So my true story can never be told, and the depth of my humanity never exposed, setting aspirations for others that can never be met, using a single action to trap me in your mythology, a butterfly encased at the height of its beauty, keeping me from my full humanity, burying me under the weight of your fantasies until no one truly knows me as anything other than a statistic. The original big lie. Among the most blatant lies of this culture is our version of the hero myth. It selects an individual who's done something extraordinary and labels them a hero for life. Originally, the act attributed to the hero required bravery or courage. Always, the act had to be either a remarkable win or a deadly defeat. In the past 5 or 6 decades, the term hero has been applied loosely to athletes, pop stars, and politicians, for example, for the most minute reasons. Children are expected to revere these individuals and model their lives after them. Greek and Roman myths, in fact, most myths from around the world, celebrate an individual's act of heroism while simultaneously acknowledging the individual's faults. Whether they be Greek, Roman, African, or Asian, every character celebrated for heroic action is revealed to have at least one flaw, sometimes fatal. Even the Torah and Christian Bible show imperfections in their main characters. Excuse me, one only need go back to the framing of the so-called discovery of this continent to see how negatively this mythology has impacted our society. Columbus is presented as a heroic adventurer seeking to bring glory to his king and queen. The indigenous populations he encountered, the Taino in Puerto Rico and all those to follow, are made to seem ignorant, violent, and requiring redemption. For generations, the truth of his misadventures, the unarmed populations he slaughtered, and the well-developed cultures he destroyed were dismissed, and their true history often destroyed. The arrival of pilgrims from England at Plymouth Rock has signaled the supposed founding of the society that became the United States, ignoring the arrival of a Spanish ship in St. Augustine, Florida, over 100 years earlier, and diminishing the successful integration between the international crew on that first ship and the indigenous people they encountered. The Catholic Church's doctrine of discovery gave Christians the right to conquer any land and decimate its population, framing it as an act of heroic conquest in the name of Jesus of Nazareth. The doctrine justified the multi-generational enslavement of Black and Brown people as a heroic act of salvation. The portrayal of the fight at the Alamo as a battle for the founding of Texas, rather than as the truth, Mexico's resistance to bringing chattel slavery into its territory, results in framing the white men who died at the Alamo as martyrs rather than as slaveholders, and the Mexicans as savages rather than fighters for the liberty of enslaved peoples. Remember the Alamo indeed, but remember it how and why. Perhaps worst of all, those who fought in wars are branded as heroes, and only in the past 20 years have they been allowed to be broken by the experience. Not acknowledging their brokenness allows us to continue to send young men and women into battlefields without planning to provide for them afterward. After all, they're heroes. What could they possibly need? To add insult to injury, an act of bravery or courage isn't even a requirement to be given the title hero anymore. Young men and women whose only achievement is putting a round ball through a netted hoop are held up as heroes to children, then chided or shunned when they turn out to be ordinary, flawed human beings when the ball isn't in their hands. People who die in an act of mass violence, like the destruction of New York's World Trade Center's Twin Towers in the September 11, 2001 air attacks, are labeled heroes. They may have been abusive spouses or tax cheats the day before, but they became heroes the day after, regardless of whether they did anything worthy of the label. Joseph Campbell made things worse by capitalizing on the bifurcation built into our history. Men, he posited, were meant to find their heroic path. Robert Bly compounded the lie by writing an entire series of books supposedly teaching men how to fulfill their mythic destiny. Entire generations of men have spent their entire life energy trying to achieve this completely unachievable goal without ever examining the cost to themselves, those around them, and especially women, and society at large. Popular culture reinforces the trope with characters like Superman, Spider-Man, and even Mighty Mouse. In recent generations, females have been encouraged to join in this superhuman quest with characters like Wonder Woman and more recently Star Trek Discovery's Michael Burnham. There's one major problem with all this. There is no such thing as a hero. There are only human beings, some of whom may do an occasional heroic thing. Those same human beings may also do horrific things or mundane things. They are, after all, only human. By stamping them with the hero label, we rob them of their full humanity. We demand they put on a facade of perfection. Facade because no one is perfect. When they inevitably falter and we discover they've done something stupid, mean, or frail, instead of dealing equitably with their action, we do one of two things. We either turn on them, blaming them for dishonoring the made-up label we put on them, rather than taking responsibility for our own foolishness and trapping them under metaphorical glass at the height of their glory. Or we become their champions, refusing to see, let alone hold them accountable for, the harm they've done. Whichever response we choose, seldom do we examine the underlying philosophy putting us in the vice grip of moral and ethical dissonance. Never do we explore the root myth setting up our bifurcated response. I want a world where men and women alike are recognized as capable of doing heroic as well as horrific things, where heroic acts are defined as rooted in moral choices, not in access to economic or political success or power. I want kindness to be the measure of character. I want a world where men and women are held accountable for the harm they cause, no matter who they are. Most of all, I want a world where no one has to be a hero to be respected. I'm not sure where we are with time. Jose, do you want to go into conversation at this point? Or?
Yeah, it's basically where we're at right now.
Yeah.
Just wanted to see where, yeah, okay, there we go. So yeah, we have basically 20 minutes, give or take, a couple. So a bit of business to get rid of before we actually start the conversation. If you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and throw them into the chat. Jim, our lovely coordinator here, amongst many other adjectives, will be keeping an eye on the chat. So, you know, if I miss anything, he'll be there. And yes, Lola, thank you so much. Your work always is always on point. It's laser precise and it hits right to the bone. I cannot think of an example of a wasted sentence in anything that I've read of yours.
Are you saying I don't have the capacity for subtlety, Jose?
Oh, please, let's not stop it. Just stop it. When we were talking earlier, a couple days ago, I asked you what it was that drove you to write something like your previous book, The Truth About White People, and you said that after spending decades as an anti-racism organizer, you saw how the focus, whenever people in our culture dealt with racism, the focus is mostly on Black trauma and rarely, if ever, on white benefit. You said that you wanted to shine a light on the self-seduction white people have to accept, the things that they just kind of take for granted in order to believe that they are superior. In your introduction today, you said that one of your driving forces was to kind of fix things, that you have just a tendency to try to not necessarily manipulate, but try to set up situations. And you said that your next book, The World I Want, is an articulation of what it was. Two questions. Was there a specific instance that kind of made you think, okay, I need to lay out what it is that I want to see, or was it just general desire? And I'll get to my second question later.
I think it's actually been an evolution for me. Last year, I was asked to write and present some poetry in a project that choreographer Donald Byrd was doing. And the topic was environmentalism and Afrofuturism. And as I began to really work on those poems, I think I began to unravel within myself a realization that I was really struggling with how much pain the world was in and how much pain I was in. And I slowly but surely began to ask myself, what's the path out of here? There has to be a way out of here. You know, how's the song go? There's got to be some kind of way out of here. And that is what I kept looking for. I kept looking for, how do I get out of this space of just wanting to curl up on the sofa and watch endless episodes of Project Runway. And for anyone who knows me, who knows I hate the whole concept of fashion, that's really a low point for me. And so as I really dug into that, I realized there's a biblical phrase, without a vision, the people perish. And it just kept coming back to me that what I had within myself was a vision of the world as I believed it could be, and of us as a species, and who we can be, who we actually have the total capacity to be, if only we would unravel the fantasies that we have built around us, and sort of, you know, go back down some of the paths that we have walked down. You know, when you come to the end of a path and you realize, oh, I meant to go to Chicago, how did I end up in Los Angeles? You have to go back and go, okay, clearly there was something in the map that I followed that was not right.
Right.
And we don't do that as a culture. We don't examine the maps that we have taken to get where we are. And I think in many ways, we've forgotten where we were going, period. We've just said, oh, well, I'm in LA, might as well enjoy LA. So what if my entire family is waiting for me in Chicago? You know?
It's like somewhere along the way, as we're growing up, a pair of blinders are put on us. And we only live with what's in front of us. We only live in that moment. And we make decisions just based on the instant that we're in. We don't really take the long view into account. And I'm curious, what you were just describing, before you started articulating this world, before you started like actually putting specifics as to what it was that you want, do you think, you said that before that your mood was low, you were watching crap TV, very familiar with that, both of those things. Did that start to change when you started articulating what you wanted to see? Did the mood start lifting?
You know, I would love to answer that and say, oh yeah, of course, it was wonderful. The truth is, no, I still watch crap TV.
Oh, no.
and you know, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has not helped. The recognition of all of the things that are going on in the world that continue to go on, the fact that there are that the rent moratorium on rent is about to be lifted in our city. I mean, there are so many things that are just still so wrong and still so painful. But I still find the need for myself, for my own sanity, to really ask myself, okay, why am I so pissed off? You know, why am I so pissed off that this person clearly does not have a vision? Oh, I know, it's because I do, and I've never articulated it. So I still, you know, and anyone who's a writer knows that writing is painful. Anybody who tells you that writing is a simple, joyous, exercise that they can't wait to get to every day and it's just so much fun is lying to you. writing is extremely painful because you have to go into and this is the other thing that's happening for me in the process, is as I'm writing, I'm also interrogating myself. Because writing requires a level of precision in language. And I'm that kind of poet, that for me, poetry is the condensation of language to express an emotion. And so writing these essays requires me to interrogate myself about what is it I'm saying, and is it true? Is it true, first of all, is it true in my own heart? But also, is it true for the general reality of the world? And so those are the kinds of things that I'm sort of wrestling with and struggling with at the same time. So does it give me, it doesn't give me particular pleasure, although I know I will have great pleasure when it's done. Because I've done it before. So that keeps me going.
I think you and I, let's set that date now. You and I, when you're done, we'll go out and have like some food and drink and just do the things we usually do.
Oh my God.
So
yes,
Deepa
music.
Yeah, hopefully, for Pete's sake. Deepa has commented into your last little thread there. Writing is painful and filled with so much shame and self-scrutiny. I wanted to combine these two questions because I think you just answered the first one. Somebody in YouTube wanted to ask you what advice you would give an aspiring writer. And I think what you were just discussing kind of fits into that, of just like putting yourself through that and asking yourself what it is that you want to say. So I'll go to the second question, and I'll have a couple more after that, and then I think our time will run out. Belinda wants to know what it is that gives you hope.
What gives me hope are the future generations. I love millennials. I know I'm a boomer and I'm not supposed to, but I love millennials. Yeah. Because whatever self-interrogation I am not fully prepared to do, they are ready to do for me. And I love that about them. And so, what I see is, if we let them live, that they will live mightily. And so that gives me hope. That really is the primary thing. And I'm also, I have to say, I write for and am associated with the South Seattle Emerald, and I see a whole new crop of writers coming up who are committed and dedicated to telling the stories of people of color, and who are not buying the generally accepted stories that are out there in the public that are provided to us by our dysfunctional media.
Well, this gets into one of my questions. Could you go into further detail about what it is that being the voices editor at South Seattle Emerald, what does it entail? What is it that you would like to see come out of this collaboration?
So I've been working with the Emerald since its birth, and have been really excited to watch how it has developed into a voice for South Seattle, and presenting the voices and reality of communities of color that have not been. We were just looking today, in fact, at a Google search where, if you look at what's in the news in Seattle today, you'll see a whole bunch of negative stuff about what's going on around the city, and particularly where it relates to communities of color. And then you'll see these articles in the Emerald that are a whole different kind of story, that are about the successes in the community, and about, things that are challenges within the community. You'll see stories about farms that are both Black farms and the Hmong farmers in our region. And you just see these amazing, wonderful, true stories. In fact, one of the things I'm going to be doing starting tomorrow, so tomorrow we're going to be asking people to, fill out a form that tells us about a woman who inspires them and who has really brought strength and life into their lives. And we're going to be publishing those. You're not going to see that in the Times or Crosscut or any other, or the Stranger. You know, we are looking to lift up the voices of our communities. And so what I get to do as the Voices editor is people make pitches to me about, or to the Emerald, about something that they are passionate about, that they believe isn't getting enough traction, or that they want to give their opinion on. I mean, it's your opinion. And, you know, I go through them. I'm looking at several right now, one of which was exciting, and I can't wait to get it, you know, written and published. And another one that's kind of an organization that sort of wants access to communities of color, but, you know, isn't really necessarily doing the work correctly. And so I get to push back on them and say, have you thought about doing it this way? So that's basically the kind of thing that we're doing. And for me, it really is, you know, when Valentine's Day came, I really wanted to uphold, especially since it was in February, I really wanted to uphold the story of Black love. And so we did a story by Gregory, oh God, my mind is going to go blank right now, of all times. The executive director of Rainier Beach Action Coalition, Gregory Davis, and his wife, Sean. And, you know, they've been married almost 40 years. And so we let them tell their story. And we also published a bunch of what we called love notes that people had written to their loved ones, because where else are you going to see the celebration of you know, people of color who love each other? You're just not. So
quickly, how do people get a hold of you to pitch something at you? Is it on the website?
Yeah, you can also email me at voices@seattleemerald.org.
Cool. And is these pitches, should they be focused solely on like South Seattle, or should be anywhere in the Northwest region or in the Puget Sound region?
Our primary focus is Southwest Seattle or South Seattle, but anything that would be of impact to communities of color, we will definitely consider, because, you know, strong together, right? Live together, die apart. Is that?
I think that's how that goes. Yeah. Jim, how much time do I have here? Do I have time for one more question?
The two of you can have as much time as you would like.
Oh, cut it out. Cut it out. Okay, then I'll make that two questions. Brevity is not either of our strong suits, so keep this in mind when I ask you this next question and the one following. This one, it comes from Michelle Youssef. She would like you to talk a little bit about the journey of acknowledgement of wrongdoing from somebody that you know, the journey from acknowledgement to acceptance while still accepting accountability from people.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It makes perfect sense. Yeah. So, you know, one of the, like I said, these essays are not complete yet, but one of the pieces that I really do want to write about is about the process of forgiveness. There's a wonderful woman, minister by the name of Marie Fortune. I don't know how many of you know Marie. She's local and was very active in the 90s in having, in really a leader in looking at clergy sexual abuse in many different denominations and religious communities. And I went to a workshop that she did, and she said something that I found more profound. I mean, just so deep. And what she said was, forgiveness is the natural outcome of justice. And I sat with that, and it just resonates so much with me. And so what I keep going back to is there is a process of forgiveness. Forgiveness is not, something where you say, gosh, I'm so sorry. I mean, I just, this last week, discovered I hurt someone terribly. And I feel just, God awful about it. And I recognize that, okay, I need to say, I'm sorry. I need to say, I'm sorry because I did this. And then I need to say, what can I do to make this right? Because, justice is a precursor to forgiveness. So I need to know what it is that you would consider just. How can I make this right? And then once you tell me what I have to do, then I need to go do it. And then that will create, I think, a natural space of being able to forgive. And it really offends me when people say, oh, you just need to get over it. You just need to forgive. No, I don't think so. And I think that's all true for the people who, be they, celebrities, politicians, or our next door neighbors, who forgot to return our lawnmower for 15 years or whatever. I think that process is exactly the same. I'm not interested in people's words. I'm not interested in words. I'm interested in action and only action. So that's
Thank you.
my long answer to your short question.
I mean, is there any other kind? All right, last question. Going back to the world I want, how it's an articulation of the world you want. So today we discussed, or you shared about wanting to alter or get rid of hero myth entirely. You also talked about school reform, reforming schools. In this book, in the things that you have done and the things that you have yet to do, what else is it that you want to address with this book? And again, we only have, a couple minutes. So,
well, let me give you my thesis. No, so there are lots of things. I've actually made a list of them. I definitely want to write about gender and gender roles. I also want to write about. I want to write about the purpose of life, which is, I think, one of those mythologies that we somehow have to have or find a purpose in life rather than just living. And then one of the other things that irritates the life out of me is the call for small government. Government is, in my view, is our contract with one another. It's how we decide how we're going to live in the same space together. And I don't want a small contract. I want a clear contract. And if it turns out to be large, because that's what it will take for us to be clear about how we're going to live on this land together, then I'm good with that. And yes, I'm actually even willing to pay the taxes to make that happen, which is—
Oh, my stars are garters, Lola. What the hell?
Yeah, I'm unusual. What can I say? And then another thing I want to write about is business and the fact that we don't recognize, businesses have to get licenses in order to function. And when they get a license, they are actually entering into a contract with we the people. And that contract says you will behave in such and such a way. That's why we're giving you this contract. There are limitations on what you can do. And yet, in so many spaces and ways, we've let businesses run wild without, and all because they provide jobs, which is its own mythology. So lots of things.
Huge mythology. And before we dive down, we could easily dive down that hole. Let's go ahead and hold that for a future date. How's that?
Sounds good.
We are a little bit over time. Thank you, everybody involved, for your patience. And now I hand the floor back to Paula.
Cadest, actually.
Oh, sorry, Cadest. Back to you.
It's
you.
all good.
Thank you.
I was misinformed.
Before we wrap up, I just want to give a big thank you to both Lola and Jose. Lola, for coming and sharing your time with us and your wonderful and inspiring work. Truly, all of us are going to be leaving with a lot to think about and a lot to look into as we move forward. And Jose, for guiding us through this event, a big thank you to you as well. I also want to give a thank you to everyone who helped prepare this event. So EDI, AHSS, as well as EPIC for helping both with this event and the events throughout the month. And finally, a large thank you to all of those who have tuned in to celebrate Black History throughout this month, and a reminder to do so into the future as well. Thank you all for coming here today, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you to everybody.
So Lola, I just wanted to say that I'm living in a house where there are some students from Denmark, and their school is paid for and their healthcare, and I am really agreeing with the bigger government, and as far as taking care of their people, they are really taking care of their people.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, we are among the societies who, because of our mythology, really because of our mythology,